Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
Okay, do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
I just have that Secretary French is scheduled to join us at 7 o'clock. So if we could just have some leniency to move the agenda around wherever we are. Great. Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Communications and public comment. We have, I believe, Art Shaver, the Executive Director of the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity. And we've invited him to go first because he'd be here. So, okay.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me in this evening, and especially for letting me go during public comment, since I will need to jump off and get to my own SU's meeting at 7 o'clock. I am the Executive Director of the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity. I live in Dover. I'm also a member of the River Valleys Unified School District and Wyndham Central SU's boards. Our coalition is a 501c4, a Vermont nonprofit corporation. We currently have 23 member districts from all parts of Vermont. 98% of our donations go right into our advocacy work. Excuse me. If it wasn't for state and federal filing fees, that would be almost 100%. We're made up of all volunteers, including yours truly, despite the 20 to 30 hours a week that I put into our coalition. I'm here this evening with two asks. First, that you consider joining the growing list of districts and SUs from all parts of Vermont that have joined our coalition. And second, that you consider making a financial donation to the coalition to help support our advocacy work aimed at at having the recommendations from the 2019 People Weighting Factors report implemented. Excuse me. Understanding that boards may have some concerns about the legality of such a donation, we start by saying the coalition are not lobbyists. We have hired a lobbyist. The difference isn't just subtle, it makes all the difference in the world. We did reach out to the AOE and received an opinion from their general counsel, who, after consulting with their finance division, concluded that they see no reason why these expenditures of state funds would not be permissible. And that's what all of our member districts have been operating under. Full implementation of the People Weighting Factors report, excuse me, full implementation of the recommendations would essentially mean the state's education fund would be distributed in an equitable manner based on student needs. This was the intent of the Vermont Supreme Court decision handed down in 1997, Brigham versus State. Unfortunately, when such important decisions are decided based on politics, achieving the ultimate goal is all too often cast aside. For more than 2 decades, almost all Wyndham County districts have been shortchanged by the existing people weighting formula. Over the past year, I found myself learning something new about how the state funds education on almost a daily basis. If you've ever found yourself confused or bewildered by our system, you're in good company. Most school board members and legislators are in the same boat. In fact, part of what the coalition finds itself doing is essentially running 3 simultaneous education outreach programs. One for school board members, one for legislators, and one for the general public. I'd be kidding you if I told you that I could thoroughly explain the inner workings of our system in just a few minutes, but let me give you some highlights. In Act 60 and 68, the legislature decided the best way to equitably allocate taxing capacity was through a weighting formula, which currently weights students in poverty, English language learner students, and high school students as a little more than 1 student. This is how we get from ADM to equalized pupils, which is what's used to determine tax rates. Let me back up a second and talk about taxing capacity. Unlike funding systems in place in almost every state in our country, our formula doesn't actually allocate resources or funds. Instead, it allocates taxing capacity, which roughly translates to how much actual money you can spend from $1 of tax revenue. Current underweight districts, such as WNESU, in a just world, would be able to spend more than $1 for each dollar in tax revenue from your taxpayers. The mechanism to achieve higher taxing capacity is an increased number of equalized pupils, which would reduce per pupil costs, which would result in higher revenue from the education fund and without increasing your tax rate. Clear as mud, I assume. As an example, currently a student in poverty is weighted as an additional 0.25. The work done by the team of UVM and Rutgers researchers found that the number should be 2.97. Similarly, they found the existing weight for ELL students was insufficient and that we need to add weights for small schools, which would actually replace our small schools grants program, and sparsity or rurality. The corrected weights would also greatly reduce the likelihood of being put into the penalty box, which down here in what I like to call the Southeast Kingdom, we all know has been unintended consequence of the excess spending threshold and has been a double whammy, hurting our small towns and greatly disadvantaging the rural nature of Southern Vermont. The corrected weights, as presented in the pupil weighting factors report, would force a redistribution of tax capacity. That would mean that currently overweight districts that have been receiving more than their fair share of the pie for over 2 decades will have to make some hard decisions. They will either have to raise taxes over what have been artificially low taxes in order to maintain their high level of spending, or roll up their sleeves and find ways to do more with less, as we've been doing for the past 20 years. The important thing to remember is that recalibrating the weights, every district in the state is going to receive the funding they need to properly educate all of their students. If overweight districts choose to continue spending at their higher than necessary levels, that is their choice. The difference will be borne by their taxpayers by an appropriately calibrated excess spending threshold and penalty. Let me throw out another complication into the mix for you. This study and the report was ordered as part of Act 173. As you know, there are some good aspects of 173, such as an emphasis on multi-tiered support systems. But the financial shift in 173 from reimbursement to census block grant is highly punitive for districts that have high poverty and high need special ed students. Gone are the days of being reimbursed for a percentage of all SPED expenses. Starting in fiscal year 23, they'll be phasing in the census block grants, which ignore expenses in favor of a simple calculation based on ADM. This means being hit with yet another whammy. If the weights aren't corrected, the hit to your revenues is going to be big. That means either reducing the necessary services, which would have the unintended consequences of also reducing your federal SPED revenue, or making up that difference on the backs of your taxpayers with even higher taxes. It's the coalition's position that moving forward with 173, as it appears the legislature and the AOE intend to do at this time, without correcting the weights, would be devastating to many districts and SUs, including WNESU. Let me bring this back to where we are today. The coalition has been engaged and actively advocating for equity for both our taxpayers and our students for over a year now. At the beginning of the 2020 legislative session, we were told there would be no movement on this issue because of COVID. We found that unacceptable and ultimately persuaded the legislature to pass S13, which ultimately became Act 59. I should note that the legislation received unanimous support from both the Finance and Education committees in both the House and the Senate, and ultimately passed with unanimous support on the floor of both the House and the Senate. Our coalition was able to have included the 2-year moratorium on the excess spending penalty, which has been a huge relief to many underweight districts. Numerous Windham County districts saw savings as much as 16 cents on their tax rate because of the moratorium. The summer task force created by Act 59 started working in July and has at present and has to present, their recommendations and proposed legislation to the entire legislature by December 15th of this year. At present, the task force, led by co-chairs, one of whom is Rep. Kornheiser from Brattleboro and one of whom is Senator Hardy from Addison County, has begun presenting their proposals. Their first proposal is to do the opposite of what experts have recommended for ELL. Not only are they saying they won't increase the weight, but they are eliminating ELL altogether from the weighting formula. They are proposing a categorical grant instead, the amounts for which are not based on any empirical evidence or research, such as what backs up the recommendations from the report, but instead are amounts that just make sense to them. For districts like WNESU, who's a member of the coalition, while they would see a small increase in ELL funding, it's a pittance compared to what they would receive from corrected weights. It's approximately $1 million less. Their overweight neighbors that have benefited from 20 plus years of more than their fair share of funding would also see an increase in their ELL revenues. This has the added benefit, at least for co-chair Senator Hardy, providing more funding to the districts she represents, even though they are already overweight. And the proverbial double whammy of it all is that by choosing categorical aid, they are increasing the amount of revenue the Ed Fund will require, which means an increase in taxes for every Vermonter, even those for whom the research is clear just need more resources without higher taxes. Let me finish with just a few more thoughts. There are a number of problems with the direction the task force is currently headed. They don't have any empirical evidence for their proposals, while we have a 150-page report for which we taxpayers paid $300,000, which is chock full of empirical evidence from which the researchers derived their recommendations. While our system is currently complex, the proposed solutions only adds to that complexity, further distancing taxpayers from the budgets and tax rates. In fact, what the task force is looking to do is undo the part of Act 60 that was good, having a statewide formula that distributes resources based on needs and not race, background, politics, family wealth, etc. And instead putting in place a new system based not on data and empirical evidence, but based on it being the easier political answer. Implementation of the corrected weights is actually unbelievably easy and simple. It's just a matter of substituting the old weights with the new ones, using the same existing formula that we've been using for the last 2 decades. But it's politically difficult for those politicians that are hearing loud and clear from their wealthy constituents that this is unacceptable. In fact, John Alberghini, Superintendent of Mount Mansfield Unified Union School District, one of the wealthiest in the state, twice testified that his taxpayers wouldn't even accept a 3 to 5 cent increase in their taxes. I don't know about all of you, but in my neck of the woods, 3 to 5 cents is an annual increase. Based on the most recent analysis by the Joint Fiscal Office, which was based on fiscal year 20 data, Bella Falls Union High School would see an increase of 12.4% in equalized pupils, which would equate to about a 25-cent drop in tax rate if they didn't put any of their additional taxing capacity into education spending. Unfortunately, the task force is choosing not to update the report's modeling to account for Act 46 changes, instead pulling a Wizard of Oz and telling us ignore what's behind the curtain. The coalition has received donations from a majority of our members, member districts and supervisory unions. The donations have ranged from $500 to $8,000. Our board opted not to have membership dues, but instead favor our members making a donation an amount that they feel is most appropriate. For most districts, the potential return on investment is huge. For many, the donation is a very small price to pay for the hundreds of thousands of dollars they've already saved in excess spending penalties just in fiscal year 22. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, come back at a time that would be convenient for you, understanding that you've got a full agenda and I probably should head out pretty soon. But if you have any quick questions, I'd be happy to take them.
We don't usually do questions for public comment, but for next week, not next week, we will be having a meeting on November 10th, and I will add consideration for joining and donating as agenda items on that. If you have anything you'd like to email me, I think you sent a link to your website, which I think probably has everything we would want to see that we can look in before that.
The one thing that is not on our website is we do have sample resolutions or motions that you can use if you want, which I will email you.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, we figure it makes life a little easier for people and you don't have to come up with your own. And if you'd like me to attend that meeting, just, send me an email and let me know. I should be able to make it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Do we have anybody else for public comment? Okay, review and approve minutes for September 22nd. Anyone? Anyone at all? We all have the minutes from the 22nd. Anybody like to move to approve them, or move to table it till next time, or move to correct them? Then move to approve. All those in favor, I guess I can go around. Sorry, who was that? I can hear somebody. Yes, my list of voting members. I believe from Rockingham, Megan, Jason, and Priscilla. Megan, how do you vote?
Sorry, I vote yes. Couldn't find my space bar.
That's okay. Jason Benson.
Yes.
Priscilla Lambert. Yes. That's all you have is 3, right? Yes. Next up, Deb Wright from the high school.
Yes, I just want to say it sounds like you're in the next room, and I'm not sure why the volume from the shared meeting room is so minimal.
It might be the speaker placement. Can we move them one of those up? Oh, okay.
I could be lying. I could give them a little thing for me.
We will try to fix that. Molly from the high school, are you voting?
No, I'm not voting. I didn't read them. I abstained.
Oh, you abstain, but you are the voting member.
Yes, I am.
And Jason Terry from the high school? Yeah.
No.
I'm sorry, Brenda from the high school.
That's okay. I was not there, so do I have to abstain? I did read them, but
You can do whichever.
I'll approve of this.
Okay.
This one's question.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I vote to approve. That's 7. Who am I missing? Lynn.
Yes.
Lynn says yes. That is 8. Who is number 9? Cheryl D. They can't vote.
That's
So
right.
Westminster can only vote on things that pertain, however peripherally, to the budget.
Or personnel, which is budget.
Or personnel, which
Right.
pertains to the budget.
Exactly. You'd be looking for Jack,
I would be looking for Jack, and I don't think he's there.
but you still have enough votes.
But I still have enough votes, yeah. Because I have 8 out of 9.
Wednesday.
So minutes are approved. Next up, superintendent's report.
All right.
Interim superintendent's report.
I'm trying to do this in 8 minutes here real quick. And I'm just going to summarize. I sent out my report to everyone, and I'm going to post it. It'll be posted later tonight or tomorrow morning. We all know COVID is affecting us, and we've had quite an increase in cases to date, or as of this last weekend. In the total SU, we've had 53 positive cases. since
Wow.
school. And they've been steadily increasing in the number of positives. Surveillance testing is definitely catching a lot of that, but we're also finding out that sometimes parents do the right thing and they take their child to get tested, and they find out their child's tested, and the state is telling them, oh, we'll contact the school, don't worry about it. And so the parent doesn't contact the school, and the state doesn't contact us for a while. And so we're really asking parents if they can please contact us as soon as they can when they know their child might be positive, even if the state says they're going to contact us, because it just helps us with contact tracing and figuring out any potential exposure. But the surveillance testing has been robust. It could be, we'd like to see more people participating in it, but it has helped out quite a bit. We are shifting. We were testing on Thursdays, which means we would get the results back typically Friday night, Saturday morning, which inevitably meant the school nurses and the school administration were spending a lot of quality time talking to each other and parents on the weekends. We've petitioned the state and we're actually moving it to Tuesday. And so that's going to, I believe we're looking at November 9th as a start date for that. We just need some transition time there, so to do that. As far as masks, from the AOE, Secretary French indicated that their guidance is that students should continue to wear masks up through mid-January in buildings, and then after that is the 80% if the building population is at 80%. Test to Stay, which is the program that would allow us not to have to quarantine students. We're working with the state to try and get that test program up. Rebecca Stockwell, our SU nurse, is to be commended. She's been working hard to get us all the waivers that we need. I got an email recently about we want to ship you our supplies, but we've got to get some other logistics in place. But we're moving in a real positive direction, and hope to have that up soon. Transportation, just so everyone knows, we use a software called School Bus Manager, and that helps us to set our routes. We've been using it pretty much this year. It allows us to kind of connect with the different, it allows us to kind of do the routes and everything. We could do an add-on to it that would allow us to really look at a GPS and know where the buses are in the predictable times, but that would be about an extra $700, and we currently pay $1,000 a month. Secretary French is here, so you want me to just go ahead and get him in and start and pause?
Unless you have like 2 minutes.
Winter sports, we haven't gotten, the AOE is not giving any guidance, and so I'm working with the middle school and the high school to come up with basically what we feel would be acceptable for us, but then also work with the Southeast Regional Superintendents to come up with a consensus for the region. As far as social emotional stuff, there are numbers up there, but anecdotally, our students are in real need, and our teachers are in real need, and we continue to work on it. But the discipline numbers I have here, and again, I'll post those for you to look at. There's some, yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say respectfully, I think we have more to ask Andy about, so I'd go ahead and have him come back to the
And then we'll come back and do questions as well. Okay. Secretary Dan French is here from the State Agency of Education.
Not in
He's not
yet.
here. Well, we'll let him in.
He's warming up.
Maybe
Yes.
we might want to ask him about those winter sports because it was on the news last night.
I don't know. I don't know if this is a question or answer with him or what. So
Okay, now Secretary Dan French from the State Agency of Education is here with an update from Montpelier.
Good evening. How are you?
And,
Can you hear me okay?
yeah.
yeah.
Great. And good evening. I'm Dan French, Secretary of Education. Primarily just wanted to reach out and offer my support and the agency's support in your superintendent search process. Been monitoring that a bit. And I know a superintendent search process, having been a superintendent and a search consultant, is always challenging, but in particular in the middle of the pandemic. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that we're here to support you, and I personally, as secretary, am here to support the district's work, and don't hesitate to reach out if we can help at any part of the process. So that's my primary message this evening, but I'm happy to discuss any other aspects since we have some FaceTime together. Any way I can help support your work.
Anyone? Anybody at home have questions for Secretary French?
Chat.
I was looking for a hand. Just raise a hand if you have.
Can you ask about the winter sports program?
You can ask him. Priscilla Lambert has a question. She's one of our members.
We understand that you haven't actually put out the information on the winter sports program, maybe to our administration, but there was some of that on the news last night. So where are we in that process, and can you give us any information on it?
Sure. Yeah, we did publish the winter sports yesterday afternoon. We highlighted it at the press conference, but then published it in the afternoon. I would say, it's very similar to what we did last year. Of course, the big difference this year is that we have vaccination widely deployed for students and adults. Our guidance, if you will, are recommendations, so they're not mandates. That's the first important aspect. We are enabling all sports this year. Last year, we had a few that we were unable to support, but this year we enabled all sports. We are strongly recommending, again, not mandating, but recommending all student athletes should be vaccinated. We're recommending all student athletes should be tested once a week. We are recommending all student athletes, coaches, and so forth wear masks, with some exceptions for a couple sports that, such as wrestling and gymnastics, where the athletes might be inverted or upside down, or where masks might come loose and inhibit their performance or create a safety issue. And I think the last piece is around spectators. So our recommendations basically permit spectators pursuant to the local school district's mitigation requirements. And in a situation where there's a potential difference between the two schools' mitigation approaches, we recommend that the home school or the host school mitigation requirements prevail. So those are out in writing. But if you have any questions beyond that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Next up, you have
Jason Terry had his hand up.
And then I'll follow.
Okay, next up is Jason Terry. He's on the high school board here.
Hey, Mr. French, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. We spoke a few times last year via email, and you were very helpful, I thought, on answering questions to get basketball for all the student athletes, both boys and girls. So first, I want to thank you for that. And could you just clarify for me, please, what's the difference between wrestling with no mask and basketball? There's a lot of close contact in basketball also. So I was just wondering what the thinking was behind that. And I had another question as well.
Yeah, and I would say I think as you're aware, our guidance is formulated with the input of a lot of athletic directors and coaches and so forth. The issue with wrestling in particular is that I think, there's potential a lot more with the various holds and so forth of masks to come off or to become an obstruction or, like, as I mentioned, a safety issue. So that's the primary reason why it's given that exception in the guidance.
And then lastly, it's just guidance. So like Mr. Haas, as he said, the superintendents can make their own decision, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then So my thinking was Fall Mountain, which is 4 miles away from us. They set out some guidance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with New Hampshire stuff, but
Yeah,
they,
I think I'm not up to speed where they are this season. So if you want to, I know
So-
Fall Mountains, New Hampshire. So if you want to let me know, I'd appreciate that.
I can send that to you if you'd like.
Sure.
But so their strategy was they had like caseloads per 1,000, and then that number dictated whether the student athlete had to wear a mask or not. And it was quite interesting how they the numbers behind it, and they came out with it in September, and basically their philosophy is mask for no players, but mask for spectators, and 2 to 4 per person. So, I strongly encourage our area to do that, and we have a luxury with a huge gym, so space isn't an option. And again, I just wanted to say thank you and appreciate all you did last year for me personally, and helping me, and with everything else. So thank you.
Yeah, I would just follow up on that to say, it's important, obviously, to have some flexibility in what we produce for districts like yourself that are on the border and do play New Hampshire schools. The other thing I've noticed in my travels in the last month or so is that we, as a state, we have a fairly high student vaccination rate as an average. I think we're the eligible student population now. It means the kids that are older than 12. The student vaccination rate on average in Vermont is 77%, somewhere in that ballpark. But it does vary from region to region. So, I've heard immediately yesterday, for example, from principals and coaches, and they're like, our school has a vaccination rate of 90%. We would prefer not to wear masks. But there are schools in our state that have vaccination rates lower than 50%, closer to 40%. So, that's part of the dynamic that's playing out right now. So again, we certainly, would like folks to be able to work together. We've seen that pattern in other states, and I'm confident that you'll work that out with your neighbors on how best to proceed. But hopefully that'll work. Good news is we're going to enable all sports this winter, which I think is really important for kids and their emotional well-being.
Cheryl Charles from Westminster.
Secretary French, thank you for being here. Cheryl Charles, Chair of the Westminster Board. I have comments in 2 categories, both of which relate to COVID, if I may. The first is to ask your help in encouraging the governor to do even more, even though he has recently, do even more to express to people the importance of getting vaccinated and following all the practices, including to encourage parents to have their children participate in the testing program. We're actually seeing a much more disruptive school year than we even did last year.
Yeah.
Just because the variant is creating these circumstances where we've got quarantine. I know you know this. I just want your help in conveying the seriousness of this to the governor. And secondly, related to that is it's my understanding that current policy right now would have students who are at home, working from home, being schooled at home as a part of the quarantine process, not being counted as ADM, not being counted for the average daily attendance as they were last year. I believe I'm correct.
It was around, if we had to close an entire school, that
Okay.
they wouldn't, that wouldn't count it would be like a inclement weather day, and so we'd have to make up that day. But if a student is home sick or quarantining, we continue on with our normal sick quarantining.
But the
As long as
50%.
50% are there.
Right, as long as, I'm
50%.
just concerned
Yeah, I
about
could-
loss of revenue to the
Yeah.
school if we
I
don't
could-
count the impact of COVID. That's my.
I could address that. Student attendance is no way connected to ADM. So a student who is enrolled in a school, whether they're present in the building, excused absent, unexcused absence, they're still enrolled. And
Okay.
it's that enrollment that triggers your ADM. So, the vagaries of student absenteeism, attendance, and so forth do not impact your ADM or equalized pupil count.
Okay.
I think I couldn't see who the person in the back of the room, but the issue this year, what the difference is, has to do with the school regulation. It's a school attendance regulation that says each school has to offer a minimum of 175 student days. And we define one of those days as when 50% or more students are present in the building. So the question is, do schools who have more than 50% of their students absent on any given day? We've had a few such situations like that this year. Would those days need to be made up at some point? It's still unclear whether they will or not, but what we have done, and just recently, last week, I asked the state board to give me the authority to process waivers for those kinds of requests. The way the regulation's written, those requests don't come in until the second half of the year. So if you have that situation in one of your schools and you want to pursue a waiver at some point in February, we're going to have an expedited process available for you to do that. We'll certainly be very sympathetic to the issues related to the Delta surge that we went through. So, but ADM not connected. But
Okay.
yeah, point well made on what we need to do more. It's been a really challenging year. I would agree. In many ways, this opening has been harder than some other moments of the pandemic, but there's been many hard moments. We're increasingly, as you know, vaccinations are critical. It's probably the most critical mitigation strategy that we can do. We've done our best, I think, and that's represented in the numbers that, Vermont typically has one of the highest vaccination rates in the country, but we still have a significant part of our population that's reluctant to participate in that, and that has to be acknowledged. I think what we're going to see happen, as you know, the vaccination for students age 5 to 11 is probably going to be approved next week. We're going to be ready to move forward on that very quickly. I expect there's going to be some reticence among parents, and not necessarily in a negative way. I just think people are more cautious about younger children, and many of the medical experts internationally are also cautious about this. But this is going to be an important phase in shifting how we operate schools in the coming months. So I'm hopeful that will be well received. But where I think that's going to leave us, and this is where I was pointing to the variation in student vaccination rates, because that not only impacts basketball, but it impacts, how we can support communities. We have communities that have very high vaccination rates, high student vaccination rates. Increasingly, those communities are going to be operating in a very continuous, sort of stable way. And there are parts of the state where the vaccination rates are much lower. And we at the state level have to figure out how to support those communities more directly. I will notice you've seen in our COVID data that Orleans County in particular has been struggling recently in the Northeast Kingdom. And I don't know if I want to say tomorrow. I know the governor's getting his booster shot, I believe, soon, and he's going to do it in Orleans with Dr. Levine and so forth. So we're trying to focus our supports on a sort of a ecosystem per case basis. I think that'll increasingly start to look like what the state's response will be. We're going to be working in those places that really are struggling with vaccination rates in particular. And so that allows us to get a little more targeted in our support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions for Secretary French?
So, Molly Bannock, the chair of the high school board, the thing that I guess probably, and maybe you understand that, Andy, better than I did, but at the high school meeting Monday night, my understanding was if we had a day where we had 50% of our kids out because of all of this, that we were going to have to make that day up, but you're saying we don't?
Yeah, I summarized this with your superintendent a bit. Not necessarily, I guess, is the answer. There is a waiver process available. I have the authority to process those waivers. Typically, a state board or the state board has that authority. Last 2 years, with COVID, they delegated that authority to me because we expect to have a number of these waiver requests come forward. What I'm just messaging to you, I can't decide your waiver request today because you haven't submitted one. And the regulation doesn't allow me to process them until the second half of the year. The regulation is designed basically to handle snow days or like a pipe bursting or something like that. And the idea would be districts wouldn't pursue a waiver till the second half of the year because we wanted to see if they can make up the days before then. And typically, if a school district would pursue a waiver like, hey, we've tried to make up our vacation days and so forth, but we're still going to be short, we'd like to waive the requirement. So you know, with COVID, we've created an expedited process for that. It's too early to decide it. What I just wanted to message to you is that I'll be very sympathetic to waiver requests that are a result of COVID.
Okay, thank you.
The other question I have is that I have heard that 2 of our neighboring SUs are also going to be looking for superintendents in the coming year. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That'll affect the candidate pool.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's, yeah, again, my message tonight, I just appreciate the opportunity to follow up on your search process request. You know, as secretary, I do have a role in the search process. If I knew specifically what you were addressing, I'd be able to share that with you, but I don't think I've received formal notification of anything in your region at the moment. But you know, boards, as you have done, have to request permission to start a search. And then I have a role at the end of the search process when you've identified your finalists. But yeah, I would say, you know, again, having been a superintendent and also have served as a search consultant a couple times for superintendent searches, it's always a challenging search. And then in particular in this environment, you know, it's a stressful job and a good day and during the pandemic. Not to say, you know, your superintendent's in a stressful situation, but you know, it is important to understand if your neighbors are going through a similar process, you know, but I'm unaware of that at the moment.
Does anybody else have anything for Secretary French? Anyone at home? No hands?
No hands.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you. And
talking again soon.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to reach out. I know your superintendent won't, but you know, here to support you in your work. And you know, thank you for your service as school board members. Good night.
Good night.
All right, back to the interim superintendent's report.
All right. So going back to it, social emotional and where we are disciplined. So in talking with the principals and what I've been noticing collectively, we're noticing that our students are in need of emotional support more this year than we have in past years. Students are coming back to school, feeling lost, you know, not necessarily having the social skills of working with each other in the school building. Students are in need of more breaks. They're in need of more mental health check-ins. They're seeking out adults more often for that. Students need to access our school-based clinicians and our school counselors more than prior years. So we're seeing a large uptick in that. I just heard today that the high school school-based clinicians are booked solid, and they can almost use a third person. We have 2 clinicians here. So, you know, just to kind of put it in perspective a little bit. Additionally, staff have noticed that much of the first 6 weeks of school have been needed to teach students how to be students. You know, we realize that students in kindergarten through 2nd grade really have never seen a traditional school year in any normalcy. So we were having to spend a lot of time doing that. And many of the behaviors appear to be from the lack of consistency of attending school. So that's where those behaviors are coming from. The middle school is starting to implement circles to restorative practices, and they're also using CHAMPS, which is a positive behavior intervention system. Many of the elementary schools, they're not necessarily seeing suspendable offenses because they understand that the students are dysregulated, and so they're trying to work with that as opposed to, you know, just being, you know, black and white with them much more. The numbers that I submitted to you and looking at last year versus this year, I think one of the things we need to recognize with last year, we were in a hybrid situation at the beginning of the school year, and so there was a much different approach to you know, student discipline. And I think what we need to do in trying to do it is look back at other years and look at where are we at 2019 versus 2021, 2018 versus 2021. But you know, there's there's definitely been an uptick of office referrals this year. And then there have been more suspensions this year at the middle school and the high school, just based around the idea that there have been more behaviors at those levels. So. Can we keep going? Do you have questions? I can do it either way. What would you like?
I have questions.
Do you want to wait or do you want to go now?
I can free flow. I'm good. So.
Let me ask, I have questions in a couple of categories. One, I really appreciate your giving us the update on the surveillance testing, which we had asked for, so thank you very much. What isn't here is the percentage. I can't quite tell, for example, of the number of students. I can do the math, but I haven't done it. What's the percentage of the student population that is participating in surveillance testing? I think that's
I can get that for you.
A helpful addition. And I believe, I'm noticing now that Westminster Center School, Liz Hardy, the principal, is including encouragement to participate in surveillance testing. I'm not seeing you do that yet, Andy, and I think that encouragement is important because it's a part of the safeguard for the whole community, just to encourage people. So when you go through that routine letter to people.
Yeah, we can definitely add that in. We've been tweaking it and adding things. We just added, just encouraging folks that, especially as Secretary was talking about with the youngins eligible for vaccination soon, if kids can get vaccinated, if they're eligible for vaccination, we encourage.
That's a whole nother topic about the reported rate of vaccinations at Bellows Falls Union High School, reported in the paper being at 25% or something like that.
About 28%.
Yeah, they told us Monday it was 28%, and he's saying the state is 77%. So.
And I think what Mr. Broadley was mentioned very clearly was that's the physical. We've seen the card, as opposed to many parents are saying when he's on the phone with them, my kid's vaccinated, and he says, could you please bring in the card? Can you please? We need the physical verification. What we've even seen with staff is some staff are reluctant to even go that far as to show us that piece. But I think any parent, whose child is vaccinated, if they can bring us in that card, we're documenting that, and that's it helps us with contact tracing tremendously.
Right. So that's just a need to be addressed still with encouragement, information, all of that kind of thing. And then the other, looking at the social and emotional, we hear it everywhere anecdotally. To have these numbers is really helpful. The numbers are kind of surprising, and I understand it's not a fair comparison just to last year, but Saxon's River, the office referrals look surprisingly high compared to the other elementaries. Middle school, is it really that high? Kind of help us understand what's going on.
So one of the things that I tried to start working on last year, without getting into all the reasons, but since I stepped in this role, I've noticed we have different reporting mechanisms at each school. And we've talked as an administrative staff of coming up with a clear, concise, and universal method. It almost sounds easier than it is. It's a pretty heavy lift, and we are trying to look at what's the right tool to use for reporting. But we also need to define, so when a student, I'll use the term insubordination. What is insubordination? And what does insubordination look like in Saxon's River, in Westminster, and in all the different schools, and then at the different age levels, it can vary. So it's really having that discussion and really coming up with very clear guidance and consistency across the way. But I think that's one of the reasons you see that variation of some big numbers and whatnot. But I think at the middle school, I think it's been very challenging for those students. It's a challenging age. As if we've had children, we all know that's a very challenging age for kids. Many of those, like you say, those kids haven't been in school for a lot of times. They're used to, some kids went to school in pajamas when they were hybrid. so just having to come to school getting dressed is now an issue, you know, like, so we're having to deal with that. And I think that is a large piece of it. But we're going to continue to work on these numbers and get you some more, you know, get you more substance behind the numbers, to be able to answer some of those questions.
It's also great that you and the whole team are talking about it, surfacing it. It's just really healthy and important to talk about these challenges. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm done with questions for now. Thank you, Desmond.
Student services, they've been, one of the things student services really pushed this year is universal screening, with not only with our speech and language, which we've always done, but we added occupational therapy this year. So our occupational therapists and our CODAs went in and did universal screening with our kindergartners. We also implemented a universal reading assessment through DIBELS for grades K through 4, and student services really picked up that ball, and they went through and did all the assessment for the kids, and it's good data to help us that we take along with LLI, along with reading records, bring it all together to really be able to put kids in groupings.
LLI.
Sorry. Language literacy intervention, but I may not be 100% right on that, so I apologize. But so basically, it's a tool to help you understand like what intervention a student needs,
Okay.
and then you can target that grade level or where they are as far as the reading. But thank you, David. Is David Clark here? He's the one who's supposed to catch me on all those things. So it looks like
He's here.
Okay, so
He was.
Maybe under an alias.
Yeah, so the other piece is student services is really early identified that this year we were going to need more behavioral support, so we increased our work with our behavior consultants. But we need to continue to work to bring that all together under with our trauma-informed practices, and then also our responsive classrooms, and bring it all together. So that's important. I said I'd be quick, but I got to do a shout out to school nutrition. Harley and his crew have done a phenomenal job. So they have served 129,098 free meals to children through the summer food program, and they're fully reimbursable, so it's not costing the district anything.
Fabulous.
Yeah, and I'm trying to jump through this, and please take some moments to read through it, because Harley really put some time and thought into some of this output. But they have increased their output 2 to 3 times. And to put it in perspective, Orange East, that the secretary brought up, they produced in 2020, they produced 367,000 meals. And let me find us, because I think you put us in here. During that same time, we put out 191,000 meals. But the difference is the size of the district, putting it into perspective. Also to put out like Wyndham Southeast, which is our nearest neighbor, only produced 190,000 meals. So we're producing more meals than our neighbor with a much smaller staff. So it's been a big kudos to him. The business office is finished up with the auditors, and so we're working on, that should be coming soon.
Expecting the draft soon, so we can start reviewing the documents with them. So I did follow up with them, so I'm waiting on a reply.
And last, human resources has been working. We have open enrollment going on right now, and then we also, Joellen has really been working to reach out to folks to bring in and kind of hear them, but also to answer questions, and doing that piece. Just today and finishing up the rest of this week, Joellen, who's our HR manager, and myself, and it's just a small token of appreciation. We started with the high school here in Westminster, but we just went around and passed out cider donuts and cider to our teachers and staff. And in no way is it's, going to make, I mean, it was just something, a way also for them to see a face and to know a face of Joellen, because not everyone knows who she is. It was a great opportunity for me to make a lot of high school students really upset because we had to tell them they couldn't have any donuts. But also to hear their humor of how they work hard here, so they're workers, so they should get it. So we made some promises for next month, but it's something we're just trying to do to connect with staff and do that. So.
All right, any
I have
questions?
a couple questions.
Go ahead.
First it's not a question, but I wanted to say I had the opportunity to eat at the middle school one day, and Harley does a fantastic job. The meal was absolutely super. They use Vermont products and to cut down and get all they can back from the payments on that, and it was just super. A question on the open enrollment. I thought that was done in June. Is that a change?
I believe so. We did change some things within, like the insurance has changed in some pieces like that. Again, what I have from Joellen is that October insurance open enrollment will be launching the week of 10/11. So that was just last week it launched, and the new employee portal will be allowed. My understanding is they're going to extend that a little bit for even some other folks, but I don't know if there's additions that you might have. I just.
So is that just, that's new employees is what you're saying?
It's for everybody. So the employee portal is it's a tool that it lets the employee pick the tiers, insurance, and everything else that they want to enroll themselves in. It minimizes errors because the employees are putting their own information and they are able to go in, update, and see what information they have, any changes in their insurances as well. So Joanna created a video, which is with the help of Ricky, and the employees are able to watch the video and self-educate so they could just do their auto enrollment. And then if they need any extra help, they can always have a meeting with Joellen as well. That helps to expedite the process, because we were having the halt with Joellen having to create contracts, doing the enrollments, doing the updated enrollments, and then passing that portion to payroll. Everything was being on hold. So that's why they implemented the online basis for enrollment with the employees, but it's for every single employee.
So they don't do it in June anymore? Because usually that's only once a year that it's allowed.
Yes, no, so it is done in November. It will be done in November.
I think with the states, when they switched, because we had one year where we had a hard time budgeting. So when the state insurance commission came online, they went to January 1st for the health insurance year.
Thank you.
And just while I have the floor, last thing, so Secretary French just emailed me and apologized that he had forgotten that Springfield is looking for a superintendent. And then I did get a text message from the school nurse here at the high school that one of the challenges, they have 141 students and staff registered for the testing, but they don't hunt the students down. So so some of the challenges are sometimes a student might be at the tech center during the testing time. Sometimes a kid may not be here, or the kids are basically notified to come down to the office, but if they don't come down, they're not going to go run around and chase a kid down. I know that I'm scheduled to test here for the SU. This is our testing site. The last 2 Thursdays I've been not in district, so that's going to lower your numbers in some of your testing, just to kind of put it in perspective a little bit. So.
Do we have any other reports for 4B? Oh, Lynn.
I had a question. I was looking over the, was one of the budgets. And are we going to be going to that, or is it a time to ask that question?
I believe budget review is going to be 5B.
Okay, I'll hold my question for there.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody at home? Do we have any other reports? I don't think we do. We'll be in a 4B. All right, adoption of the McKinney-Vento policy. This is one of our required policies from the feds about, it is unhoused homeless students. And we did our required first and second readings our second reading was in August. And then we forgot all about actually adopting it in September. So if we could get a motion to adopt the McKinney-Vento policy as it was previously read.
So moved.
Moved by Priscilla, seconded by Lynn. Is there any discussion? Anybody? Excellent. Are we ready to call the vote? Megan?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Jason Benson?
Yes.
And Deb Wright?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
Jack is not here. Jason Terry for the high school?
Yeah.
No. Molly for the,
Yes.
no. Brenda for the high school. I'm sorry. And Lynn.
Yes.
And me, and there's no Jack, and I vote yes. It is unanimous. McKinney-Vento is approved. It now goes to all the districts for approval as well, right? Is that one of the ones that gets approved? So if everybody could warn it on their next district meeting, that would be fantastic. Next up, the budget review. And I don't think I asked Flora for a particular budget review. This is for the not current budget spending. This is going to be for the next, although you can ask questions about the current one as well.
I was looking through one, it was the summer food program. And it had, for budget, it had zeros all the way down through, and then had the numbers for everything else, and everything was running in the negative. So with the budgets, do this reimbursements are not shown in that at this point?
So you're talking about for the current year? So you're talking about the budget versus actual report?
Yeah.
Okay, so the budget versus actual report for food service for the summer, we don't really budget it for because everything is funded by grants. So that's why you're gonna see it in negative, but it's self-funded program.
Okay.
So we don't really put any amount there. It's just an ongoing expense. But it
But
doesn't mean
it's
that
not,
it's not
we're
being
not
covered.
running in the deficit. That's
No,
what it
no,
looks
we're
like.
not.
And it's a great segue, to be honest with you, with a preliminary budget, what we're kind of looking at, and to kind of talk about. So one of the things that that I really think it's important is to look at what is our actual budget, like what's it cost to run the SU, what's it cost to run the districts, and then what's reimbursable through grants, so that you see where that is. So like in food services, really the requested assessment is only $180,000, and Harley then generates the income to cover whatever his actual budget costs.
Oh, okay.
And through grants, but also through he working and selling. I think he works with DCF and some other folks on actually producing meals.
Yeah.
The thing is if for some reason all of a sudden Harley wasn't able to produce any meals, and it still cost $2 million to run it, the SU is responsible for it. So if he couldn't bring in the grants, if he couldn't do all that, we would still have to cover what his cost is. And Harley, he's passionate about what he does, and he does a wonderful job, and he feels like obligated. If he says he's only going to charge the district $180,000, he will make sure he covers all of his other costs.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of how I kind of approached it. And so
Okay.
I think in the past, it wasn't always very clear, what's it cost to run the SU?
Yeah.
And so that's what we tried to do in this, just to give you some numbers. And so if you look here in column G, right here, this is the actual budget for FY23, what is being what's being looked at right now. And so, you know, a total of $11,674,000 is a total budget. However, the next column over are what we expect grant reimbursements to be. And so we're expecting, you know, $1.8 million in food and $3.4 million in special education. That's down slightly. In early education, we're expecting $229,000 in grants. And then in fiscal services,
Indirect costs.
that's indirect costs. And so the way indirect costs work is the cost of doing grant work. We can get funds back from the government basically for doing the grants. And so that money comes in and then offsets you know, some of our costs. So really we're looking at right now, you know, $5.6 million in grants coming in. And so then if you move over to the requested assessment, you get into what we're anticipating. We still need to tweak some numbers and stuff like that. These are, you know, but a budget of $6,049,902, which is $160,935 less than what it cost last year. And some of the increases and decreases are some personnel have moved, human resources moved out of the business office, moved into the superintendent's office. So you're going to see as we go through this, there's going to be adjustments in lines, but overall, we're anticipating that we will be down, as I say, 160,000.
And we did estimate as well, benefits increase as a 10%, because that is what was suggested that at DSU at the moment will estimate. It could happen that from here till December, when we get the final numbers of the benefits, it'll be lower. But, you know, we just want to be conscious, you know, that I'd rather put there that it's going to cost at least 10%. If it's less, it's great, we'll adjust that. But for now, you know, for preliminary numbers, I just wanted to give you an overall view.
So, and so what we'll share with you in coming meetings is like where all our grants and how and people who are funded through grants, because I think that's one of the other things. It's not all built into this budget, you know, but all of our interventionists and our title folks, people who work that are getting paid under ESSER, and show you, because that is a tremendous amount of dollars that if we didn't get those grants, our kids need those interventions. And I think, and I forget the gentleman's name, though, who spoke during the beginning, I think that's one of the things that if we're going to have to rely on grants to do this, that's my concern with the weighted study, you know, is that grants can get adjusted really easy. In 1 year you can have it, in 1 year you cannot have it. And so I, you know, that's my biggest fear. I don't like to operate on grants. Grants are great for supplement, but you can't rely on them. But we need the interventionists. We need them.
All right, anything else on the budget? Or anybody at home? Okay, we had our update from Montpelier. I believe their retirement incentive approval is done in executive session as a personnel matter. Is that correct?
We do have one that we need to discuss, yes.
But the rest of them?
When we looked at it, so the way the CBA is written is if a teacher can submit, they have to submit by October 1st, their intent, so that those dollars would be back. That isn't something that needs to be approved because that's something that's part of the CBA.
Okay.
And so
we don't need
our recommendation is not to approve those. However, I do have one that I need to discuss.
And that we'll do under 7. All right, approve the MOU.
Yeah, but we probably wanted to note that we have those, but we can do that in exec session too.
We have a number of those, but I think it belongs in executive session because they, it's a personnel matter until they announce that they're.
Right, they haven't announced their retirement yet, and so therefore we want Because they can still choose not to retire, and
Yeah.
and we're gonna hope that many of them choose not to retire, because we need that expertise.
All right, next up, approve the MOU between the SU and the union regarding vaccines, etc. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded by Lynn. Okay, do we have discussion? All right, are we ready to call the vote? And you've all seen this, it was emailed, it's out there everywhere. All right.
Deborah has her hand up.
Oh, Deborah has her hand up.
Deborah, go
Sorry,
ahead,
Deb.
sorry.
That's okay. I have a question, and the question is, this is just the teacher one. When are we gonna do one for support staff? That's my question.
This covers, because of the way the WNEA is structured, it would cover all members of the WNEA, which are teachers and support staff.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, let's begin. Megan,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Priscilla,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
Molly,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And that is all 8 of us. Thank you very much. The MOU passes.
Thank you all.
We actually have to sign it. You sign it, right?
We'll have a copy available, because the elementary board still needs to approve it.
Right.
And so we do have a copy available at the SU. So next time you're in, if you're in tomorrow, type of thing, we can have people sign. I
Okay,
mean, I don't have a copy with me.
that's fine.
Has anyone signed it yet?
Nobody has signed it yet.
Do you want me to sign this one?
Sure, we can do that. That'd be perfect.
So Rockingham approved it, and then
The high school board
The high
approved it
school
on
board
Monday,
approved
so.
so Molly can sign it too. All right, next up, the number 7 is going to be an executive session. Number 9 is going to be an executive session. So let's do director's comments. Actually, let's set the date of the next meeting is going to be November 10th, unless somebody has a huge objection, because otherwise we're at the night before Thanksgiving. And there's already a couple things on the agenda for the 10th, and I'm really trying to have shorter meetings, like 90 minutes max, even if we have to do 2 a month. I think everybody liked that better. Nobody wants to be here for 3 hours. It just like, we get less productive when we hit that 3-hour mark, so I'd rather not do that. So November 10th at 6:30, if that is all right with everybody. And director's comments. I have an order here. We're just gonna go with it. So Megan.
Not much from me, Jessa. Just thanks for your leadership getting us through these meetings. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Jason.
I'm about the same. Thank you for hanging in there and stepping up, and let's get her done.
Thank you. Jason. Priscilla.
I was just really pleased to hear from Secretary French. It was kind of him to come to our meeting. And I am hopeful that, although we haven't seen the 7% decrease that's been announced on the news, that it will kind of come to our district as well.
Yeah. Deb Wright.
Well, thanks everyone for the hard work. And just a reminder, of course, that Sunday is trick-or-treating day, or Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, whichever you'd like to call it. Please be careful and be safe. There are a number of CDC guidelines about how to deal with indoor parties and outdoor this year. So please be safe and stay warm. It's going to be cold.
Molly.
So, I know we're gonna talk about this next meeting, but I'd like everybody to think about it. We, as individual boards, have voted or at least the high school has, and I know they're going after all the other boards, looking for money for the Coalition of Vermont Student Equity. And that is what Max was speaking about tonight. My hesitation on that at the SU level is because kind of feels like we're double dipping. Because we're already giving money from individual boards. The individual boards are what support the SU. That's how the SU gets their budget. And so by asking them to give money also, I think we're already covering that.
Okay.
I'm not saying that I am against what they're doing or any, I'm just saying that when I hear this, I felt that this was getting taken care of at each level, and that the SU was not. I think it's double dipping. So that's just my
agenda.
That's just my comments, because I want everybody to think about it, because in my mind that doesn't work. But and the other thing we talk a lot about, you know, the vaccination rates and COVID cards and I am very passionate about the sports and what kids can do and can't do, and being able to get them out and let them do things. And you guys will get sick of me hearing it, but you know, some of the best memories is out in that gym or in a field watching my daughter have a great time and succeed and learn. So Secretary French said that the average is 77% for high school age kids. We're at 28%. So probably isn't a lot any of us can do, but if, you know, if anybody's wondering why they're not able to come to the gym or something, you know, our numbers are, and I'm not telling somebody they have to, I'm just saying that, you know, that is a huge factor for a lot of people. You know, I wouldn't have this on right now if I didn't think you guys would let me in, but I know that to participate I have to, so here I am. But I just, you know, if you're vaccinated, then, you know, share it with us so we can get those numbers up and change what things look like. Thank you.
And Brenda.
So my only comment is I want to thank Interim Superintendent Andy for his work and for the report. And
Lynn.
I'm appreciative to the way the budget was put out and explained. It helps a lot for somebody who's not number oriented. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to also say the budget, one of the things taxpayers, when we talk to people at town meeting time, is that the old budget was impossible to read unless you were an accountant who worked in state government. And I had already warned people that we're trying to make it more transparent, so they're going to see the full cost of food service. And last year it was $180,000, and this year it's going to be $2 million. So they need to like be prepared, because we're actually showing what things cost and then separately showing the revenue. And I think that'll be a lot better, but the first year, I think we're gonna have to go over it a lot with people because it's gonna look so different. And that is all I really know.
Learn how to explain it at town meeting.
Yeah, sure.
You would normally ask other directors.
Yes,
we're here.
Other directors.
So
we
why
have
don't you go to
Jason
those and then-
Terry. We have. We have the Westminster Coalition. I am so sorry.
No, thank
Let's start with you.
Oh, let's go to them and then I'll go ahead.
Jason Terry, are you still here?
I am. Thank you. Appreciate everything that Andy is doing. And I also heard that he was at the schools handing out donuts and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Keep up the good work, Andy.
All right. I'm so sorry. And then Charlie
That was me.
from Westminster.
Hi, can you hear me? Let me just put
I
my
can hear you.
video on. Hello, I haven't anything useful to say, but it's just great to hear all the information, and look forward to studying those budgets even more. And thank you everybody for the work you're all putting in.
Thank you. David Major?
Hi, everybody. I'm just want to say that I'm very pleased to be present in this SU board at this point, and thank you for all the work.
And then Cheryl.
David Clark, maybe.
Is David Clark here?
I don't know.
Is that actually Mary or is it David?
I don't see Tommy Knocker.
Yeah, I think he's, David's not up. And I think that's everybody. So Cheryl, you can.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to echo my thanks to you, Jessa, for gracefully and confidently stepping into this role. Thank you. It's not exactly what you were looking for, and it's deeply, deeply appreciated. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And similarly, Andy, you've stepped into the role with such openness and good communication skills, and deeply appreciated all of that. And then I want to reinforce for everyone, kind of building on what Molly was just saying, just to say to the public, this is such a hard year still for the teachers, for the paraprofessionals, for the principals, for everyone, and certainly for the students and their families. And we still have this kind of disrupted beginning of the school year because of the effect of cases of COVID showing up and closing classrooms and quarantining groups of students or classrooms. So I think all of us want to urge is, I know everybody cares, just be extra, extra careful, because we are having not as easy an opening to the school year as we had hoped, and it's showing up in our kids. So everybody needs to help. Thank you.
All right, I believe that is everybody. I would like a motion for executive session because we have 2 personnel matters, and there was not a third one. The third thing, the retirement incentive doesn't need a vote. So we have 2 personnel matters, and we do anticipate action on one of them. At least one of them.
I make a motion to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter and other legal matters where premature above public knowledge could place the individuals and or the board members at a disadvantage.
And we're going to invite the superintendent.
Superintendent, and who else? Anyone else that we need to invite?
I believe that's it. Help me out, though.
I think that would be it.
All right, that would be it. So can we have a second? I don't know if we need one. Lynn gets another second.
She can do it.
All right, and we vote. Megan?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
And Priscilla?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
And me, I vote yes. And our Westminster friends are invited by default because it is a budget issue.
Thank you.
And I promise I won't kick Jason Terry out prematurely again either.
Back TV is now back on. So.
There we go. Okay, now we're back in open session. Need a motion to accept the resignation?
So moved.
To accept the resignation of Michelle Jewett and release her from a contract with no penalty.
So moved.
Okay, second. Let's vote. Megan?
Yes.
Deb?
Aye.
I went out of order. Sorry. Jason Benson?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. We can actually have the Westminster folks vote on this if you'd like, because it is a budgetary, there's a salary attached. So Cheryl?
Yes.
David Major?
Yes.
Shirley Hutchison?
Yes.
All right. That one is unanimous. Second Oh, I'll vote yes too. Sorry, that makes it. The second item, can I have a motion to authorize the signing of the superintendent's contract?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything to say? Discussion.
Good luck. You're stuck with us now.
Nice way to put it.
Thank you, Deb.
Megan,
Vote yes.
Jason Benson,
Yes.
Priscilla,
Yes.
Deb Wright,
Aye.
Molly,
Yes.
Brenda. God, who's next? Lynn.
Yes.
And me, I vote yes. Westminster, Cheryl,
Yes.
David Major,
Yes.
and Charlie Hutchison.
I should abstain since a conflict of interest here.
Just gonna.
Perfect.
Thank you, Charlie.
It's still passed. That is done. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Yes.
Thank you.